So now we're talking about seizing the opportunity indeed to make sure that the language that we're seeking and the goal that we're seeking is included in the framework. We're on a very tight timeline between now and September the 14th. So we're looking at a fast start up to an advocacy campaign, and we talked about how to actually get that going, what kind of alliance was needed, starting with obviously the media development, etc. itself, reaching out to partners and organisations are very close to it, but also becoming a bit broader eventually. We talked about the leadership that was needed to take that forward, and really that's a key point, that we need to identify where really immediately where the leadership for this is going to come from. And we talked about, we had a little vote on launching a working group straight away to begin working on that and to take that forward and to roll out an advocacy plan. What else? We also looking for perhaps a champion government, perhaps within the developing world, that we can work on to be a kind of a loud voice in championing media development, media freedom of expression, etc. And we acknowledge also that in the timeline we need to do work at a national level to define the indicators, but also to gather the data and the evidence that we perhaps need in order to put this on solid ground.
Just to give you a quick context, we were kind of dividing it into what's the media, what's development, what's the things about the post-2015 process, and then what are the links, gaps, the challenges, and the recommendations. So to sum it up, basically, in the very heart and the center are the human rights and their interconnection to education and media literacy, which we were discussing quite deeply, saying that, for example, as a recommendation for the post-2015 process is that such human rights, including media or the right to freedom of expression, are actually real universal goals. So it's not a Western concept of any kind. It's been started by the Western communities, but it's still a universal goal. We've also talked about the question that media, although we say it's like they are included in human rights and they have to be included in education, and so they are very important and need to be, at least as a recommendation, included in the discourse about the new agenda. We should still say that media are not intrinsically good. So there are bad media even in Western societies as well. So we say a recommendation would be to deconstruct this myth, to deconstruct the myth of media being intrinsically good and having the challenge of building real plurality. There was a statement saying that it's not a problem of having good and bad media, it's the problem of having a situation where you only have the state-controlled one single medium, and then the challenge would be to build up plurality. And finally, to have a challenge which could be translated into a recommendation as well for the development sector. The media development sector would be that media development currently seems to be quite often deploying similar solutions to different contexts. So speaking about plurality in its context, speaking about human rights, the right to express yourself, we have to talk about different solutions, not always the single solution the Western media gave.
We thought that the MDGs have a role of enabling transparency because they're able to help to translate the very complicated and difficult language of MDGs, and they can bring a story out of it. So they translate between abstract and practical. And additionally, they are able to deliver through social media and through the digital channels. They're able to deliver that to very many stakeholder groups, and they're able to actually inspire action, supportive or other action. Thank you. And A very, very important part is also gathering data. So not just work around stories, but also gathering data and measuring impact. So contributing towards accountability. Again, digital media are extremely capable in that regard. Also, not only talking about the data and the work, but it's also talking about the people and about their needs. So a kind of different direction of reporting. Educational role, very important, and then very good niche for new media and digital media. And not to forget that it would be important for them to partner with NGOs to amplify their message. And it was mentioned here that if they don't do that, then NGOs will find their own way to amplify their messages, and with the new digital tools they will be as well able to avoid the media as partners. About gaps, post-MDG process is not a story yet. It's simply that the story does not exist yet. And also talking about where to find stories, where to look for information about MDGs, the thought came up, what is media? We can come up with all kinds of information from the internet, but how do we define that information that actually is media, that is news? So that kind of definition is actually something to discuss. And then there is absence of media community in civil society processes. The civil society is kind of limited to NGOs, the donor community, a couple of other stakeholders, but the media is actually not part of that. And yes, okay, I'll go. A key challenge, the challenge of digitalization, not only for media, but also for donors and other development stakeholders. To maybe a key point about what to do. Not only talk about freedom of press, freedom of information, but also to assert other roles of media, not the one linked specifically to human rights and freedoms.
One thing that is for sure an issue in the future is the financing and the business model role, because you can, whatever policy framework you have, for instance, and whatever will be the digital future, the big question is how you can get money for media, for journalism, for what journalists can provide on an individual basis, on an institutional basis, and that is something that cannot be done by politics. So there's a market for it, and we have to identify what are business model for the futures that are sure independence and pluralism and whatever we want to have there. This is something that is not in this picture, but needs to be addressed. The other point is about education and everything what links to qualification at the end of the day. Ethical aspect, media literacy aspect from the users, for instance, what are the channels which we reach them and so on. And another very core point is how to avoid the trap that we have that there is the discussion tilting as a kind of alternative between an individual human rights based approach and an institutionalized media approach. As the sector now is organized, there are institutions, there are media houses, there are associations and all that kind of stuff, and the discussion is heading heavily to this human rights approach, which means that every individual has to be protected by human rights, and that is sufficient if we can get that on the ground. That there is a conflict raising maybe when we think about future policies about that.